Welcome to another episode of Compass, finding spirituality in the everyday. Once again, we're jumping back a few years on this episode of Compass. The summer months present an opportunity to dig through the vault of the Compass podcast and shine some new light on an early episode that still really brings inspiration and clarity to our present day. My name is Ryan Dunn. Pierce Drake was with me on this episode from the past, and together, Pierce and I talked with Reverend Jerry Herships. This was back in 2019. The question at hand was, what is church? And Reverend Jerry's thoughts really serve as some inspiration for us to imagine the kind of community that church can be. We're now 4 years removed from this conversation, but Reverend Jerry is still at it. In this conversation, he talks about moving to a new ministry position. Well, he's now moved on from that ministry position and is back in Denver. And it sounds like he's plugging right back into AfterHours Denver, the creative church expression that he started and that we'll learn all about in this conversation. Besides founding AfterHours, Jerry has worked as a stand-up comedian. He wrote for Jay Leno. He's authored a couple books, including Last Call, From Serving Drinks to Serving Jesus, and Rogue Saints, Spirituality for Good Hearted Heathens. And actually, I think that latter book had just released around the time of this recorded conversation. So let's get back into it, exploring the nature of church with Reverend Jerry Herships on the Compass Podcast. Jerry Herships is with us. Jerry, thanks so much for joining us. How's it going?
Thanks for having me on. Good. It is wet and cloudy here in Denver, but besides that, everything else is good. Yeah.
Cool. Well, we want to throw on like the journalistic gloves to start this thing off because read your book, Rogue Saints. It's wonderful. Within the book, you're just a little bit critical of some of the ways that church is organized or the ways that we execute church.
That was passive-aggressive, Ryan. That was very passive-aggressive.
My name wasn't mentioned anywhere, so I'm all good with it. But Piers and I have answered this question in past episodes. Go back to episode 1. But Jerry, why are you a part of church?
That's an excellent question. And when you say you mean me personally, why did I decide not to chuck the whole thing? And
yeah. Why do you do what you do when your community gets together? Yeah.
So, I think one of the challenges with AfterHours getting together is we really have one guiding question that we ask, and we've asked it from the beginning. And that is we hold everything up to the mirror that says, is this thing that we're about to do, or any piece of this thing we're about to do, going to make us or lead us towards being more like Christ? Like for us, it is, and I grew up, and people have heard this before, and I wrote this in the book, I grew up Catholic, and I'm actually very down with ritual and liturgy, and I grew up with that and did Mass 6 days a week and was pretty hardcore Irish Catholic Belfast grandmother guy, and I didn't know any different or any better, and so that became sort of my embedded theology, and when it's done really well, I really like that. I think somebody like Richard Rohr would say, that's a way to really connect to your soul. Mm-hmm. For AfterHours, the folks they're sort of at the last stop before they choose to chuck it all. I mean, there's a amalgam of people that are. We have some traditional church folks that do church, regular in quotes, church on Sunday, and then they come to AfterHours on Monday. But the vast majority of them are folks that are like welders and truck drivers and strippers and cops and folks that say, I never felt really comfortable, whether it was deliberate or not. I was sort of othered in the traditional church setting. And so I want to come to something that focuses primarily on relationship and community. And so we only have a few beats to our service. We make food for the homeless, and that's sort of our service within a service. That's our call to worship. And then I talk for a few minutes, and then after 10 or 15 minutes, I throw to them and say, maybe he's full of crap. What do you guys think? And we talk at their tables. I have said more than once, I think the day of the usually still to this day dominant, middle-aged white straight male guy talking at a crowd of people and saying, sit down, shut up. You might learn something here. I think that's over. I just don't know if that connects us to the holy in the same way that being in conversation and dialogue and watching people go, yeah, I struggle with that too. And having that back and forth really brings up a lot more interesting fruit, so to speak. And then at the end, we find out what the high points of their week were and the low points, which I guess real church, traditional church would call joys and concerns. Then I say go home, and then no one. So for us, those beats of being a better follower is, how do we serve the people beyond this room? How do we try to learn something about God that maybe we didn't know before? And then how are we a community for each other? Not just the homeless out there, but the folks inside these four walls, and really listen. We always start with a quote from Paul Tillich that says, the first duty of love is to listen. And it just kind of sets the mood to remind that this isn't extra. This is like, this matters. And so listen, because people are sharing their heart. And that to me is church. And the fact that there's a community of people that want to do that, I thank God for every day. I mean, we lucked out there.
You said something on the very beginning of that I want you to expand on.
Yeah.
And I think it's just simply because of the day and age that we live in. And I think you talked about later, like, the white straight males standing up, talking. I think the days are over, and I think you're right in a lot of aspects of that. And I think those who would identify under those categories, which that's me, I think we're waking up to that,
right.
And it's a good thing to wake up to.
Yeah.
But you said centered on Jesus. And so, as I scroll through Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or whatever, everybody is claiming Jesus in some degree, and so from the far right to the far left are claiming Jesus. And so, not getting political, but when you say Jesus, centered on Jesus, what's the thing that you're thinking about in that context?
I think that speaks a lot to, I think that reveals a lot about a community or a faith leader's theology. Is just that one question, is to say, who is God in our context? Who is Jesus? And to me, Jesus was the one that always chose to align with those on the margins. Jesus was always the one that said, who is the powerless? Who are the people that don't have voice? Who are the ones that have shed all the tears, who have had their tongues ripped out, and who need friends? And I think our community has aligned with the homeless community specifically because, they have in most communities been kicked to the curb. And so for us to, quote, be like Jesus has been to how is it that we align with folks in that scenario. And there's tons of other categories of those. That's just one that rings true for this particular group of people. And how do we give them voice? How do we be in community with them and not be there and go, all right, settle down. We're here to save you. Enjoy your lunch. And no, we don't want to actually talk to you. Heaven forbid we learn your name. We'd rather just serve you and then feel good about how awesome we are. We really try early on to make it really clear that that's not what we're about, that we almost always, and Ryan, you're friends with me on Facebook, and you could see the number of times when I leave the park, how often I'm posting about the gift they gave me that day.
Yeah, well, there goes Jerry again. Yeah, must be Tuesday. Jerry's got some kind of brag. He's crying over something.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's stunning to me how often they bring me to tears. It happens with ridiculous frequency, and I think that's what happens. At least my experience when we're with the margin, people on the margins, the others, rather than do things to them. Yeah, I think they still benefit. They'd still get the sandwich, but I don't know if that's engaging with them the way Christ would. And we're about trying to be like that.
Yeah. With After Hours, you have a couple different expressions. So there's a group that meets together for kind of like a more, I guess it's a structured time. It's like your equivalent of a worship service, what most of us would understand as a worship service. And then there's the aspect where you prepare sandwiches and then the next day you go out and you give those lunches to folks.
Yep.
As folks are showing up at your Monday night gathering, are they coming because they're looking for Jesus, or are they looking for something else?
We have a number of people that come to After Hours that would self-identify as agnostic, some that would identify as atheist, a number that would identify as Catholic.
Okay.
I mean, not even Christian. They've been Catholic their whole life. And while, when you explain that to somebody early on, it's like, well, aren't Catholics Christian? Well, yeah, they are, but not our flavor, but sort of like it. But they believe the Pope's the top of the, it gets a little convoluted. Yeah. But they definitely would also come there. And I think what people are searching for, and I tried to make this point, and I don't know if I was successful in Rogue Saints, is I think people are starving for a tribe and starving for connecting to something bigger than themselves. Now, those two things can be done outside of a Christ-centered community, but that's what we're there for. We don't apologize. I think sometimes there's the assumption that we are going to get together and just drink beer and make sandwiches. Mm-hmm. And I would challenge any church that I think we mention Wesley and Jesus as much, if not more than most, because I think, I'm probably a pretty crappy pastor in the sense that I'm not one of those guys that goes, no, you have to believe that this is the only way and that this is the only guy. I'm not that guy. What I do say is, look, I've lived my life, all my life early on as a Catholic. I left for 10 years. I didn't set foot in a church, and I came back. And what I know is, when I choose to follow this guy, my life is better. When I choose to look at that architecture or hang my hat on the person that was Jesus, I tend to do better than if I go, nah, I'll just be a good guy. I'll just be, being a good guy is good. Not for me. I mean, I slip pretty quick. It's like saying, yeah, you know what? We should all work out. We should all be healthy. Yeah, we should. But I'm much better when I go, no, I'm going to get on the treadmill and get off at 4 miles. Like, I need that structure. I don't know if everybody does. And I think that's got to be one of the first things that the church is willing to say is that, look, I don't know if I'm going to want to shove this down your throat. But I will tell you that for me, this has worked. And yet I know some Buddhists that they live this amazingly compassionate, beautiful life. And who am I to tell them, well, yeah, but that's bullshit. That's not really the right way. The right way is my way. I think that turns off more people than it brings in. And like at After Hours, a number of folks have said, look, the reason I like it here is one, I'm given permission to ask hard questions and I'm not shamed. And two, that I don't even need to get the answer, in quotes, the answer. I just need to find safe space to ask the question. And three, you're not gonna force that this is the only way. I just don't think that has proven to be productive. I don't think that track record has not worked for me. And there's some very big churches that use fear in a great way, and God bless them. But I don't think that's a win in the long game. I think that's a win in short time. And so we try not to use that method either.
We've dropped Rogue Saints, the book, a couple times into this conversation, and in the book, you detail the accounts of a bunch of people who you've come across who are expressing their faith in surprising ways. Really kind of, people who are expressing their Christian faith in some surprising ways. You even mentioned that some of the folks who are participating in this would probably call themselves agnostic, although what we're seeing in evidence is that they're Christians. So what makes somebody a Christian?
In the way I define that might be different than some people. Sure. I think, so at the beginning of every chapter, I put out an open call on Facebook and said, look, if you connect to the holy, the sacred, the bigger than, in some way other than corporate worship, other than a traditional formatted, structured thing, then shoot me a message and tell me what that thing is, and we'll see. And I got a huge response, and it was great. We ended up knocking it down to, I think there's 6 chapters in the book, and I think there's 6 people. There's a few more than 6. Some lead off the chapters, and some are throughout the chapters. But what I didn't expect was that every single person that I profiled was a clergy person.
Huh.
So people that actually lead corporate worship, the thing that touches their soul in a very different way than corporate worship is this other activity that they have. And there was only one of the people interviewed that wasn't clergy, and they were married to a clergy person. And so I was like, I did not see that coming, because I didn't select them based on that. I selected them on how varied are these activities that they connect to the sacred with. And, for me, I was very deliberate in saying these were things that connected them to something bigger than themselves, and not say connected you to Jesus Christ or to this particular deity or this particular person that we choose to worship. I think there's a difference between being a faithful follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm of the camp that, look, everybody gets their ticket punched. Everybody's going to get into heaven, so you can let that other thing go, and you don't have to worry about that. There's nothing you can do that's going to make God love you more. There's nothing you can do that's going to make God love you less. So go let that piece go, because grace covers that. So you're fine. But what is that thing that connects you when you're doing it? You're like, man, I'm not saying this is true for everybody, but when I go surfing, something happens. When I'm playing music, when I'm running, when I'm doing yoga or horseback riding, there is a specific thing that's different than when I do other activities I enjoy, but there's something about this that makes it special. And so I think I'd put that in one bucket, but in the other bucket of what makes someone a Christian, I think for a long time, people were like, you move into a neighborhood and they're like, what do I need to know? Well, across the street are the Johnsons, good people. They go to church every Sunday. They're huge Christians. And that became sort of the defining factor.
Right. The measuring stick was, how often you are at a certain place on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. Did you go to a certain place at a certain time on a certain day and listen to a certain person say certain things? And then you could check the box. It made you a good Christian. And while I think everybody gets their ticket punched and everybody goes to heaven, that's all fine. You can let go of the guilt of being good enough. And, Brene Brown would call it hustling for your worthiness, hustling for your worth. You can let that go. But the question of whether you want to call yourself a Christian, which means to me, I am going to try to live like this guy, not as easy. You don't get off the hook that easy. To me, and After Hours, I think, is this even on our website somewhere. It's like, following Jesus it's simple. It's just not easy. And too often we want to take the easy route, and the easy route is you show up to a building. You don't have to do anything. We've created a consumer product. Peter Rollins talks about church as crack house, and I mean, we've created this thing that come and get your fix and listen to the great music and the great words, and you're gonna feel better, at least in the short term. Much like if you were to be on alcohol or drugs, and it'll do it, but you're not really dealing with your problems. You're not really dealing with the heavy stuff, because you're just sitting and listening 9 times out of 10. And to deal with stuff, you have to share, you have to emote, you have to go through those emotions. So I think to be a good Christian, you really have to be willing to make that connection. And I think that's simple, but it sure as hell ain't easy. I mean, it's really hard to bare your soul and to sit there and go, look, I am struggling. I mean, the number of people that are, Brene Brown again would say, we've never been this in debt. We've never been this addicted. We've never been this overweight, and yet, we think we've got it all figured out. And I think we're starving for this connection to something bigger and this connection to other people. And, not just Rogue Saints deals with that, but After Hours as a community does as well. Those are, I think, our major points, is that we want to be able to say we did at the end of the night.
Yeah. You mentioned that, like, being a Christian is is living after or following after or trying to be like this guy being Jesus, which I think is a wonderful working definition. And I might even disagree with you, Jerry, in saying that, well, people might argue with my definition. I think that's a pretty tough one to argue with, no matter where you stand theologically.
Well, that's the Wesleyan, Ryan and myself come out of a Methodist background. And so like Wesley is all about like, where's your soul pointed? It's not about crossing a line necessarily. And it's not about, I would like, we would have different viewpoints on like salvation, but as Wesley talks about, it's like, where's your soul pointed? Not are you in the box or outside of the box? And,
right. That idea of using your faith as a compass.
Exactly.
To point you in a certain direction. And, if it's serving that purpose, then where you are on the path is not as important as the direction the path 100%. Is going. Yeah.
So with that understanding of kind of faith and your understanding of it, can you do faith without community? Can those things coexist?
Yeah, I think you can. I think the Desert Fathers prove that. I think that there are monks that are able to do those things. I just think it's harder. Mm-hmm. I just think it's like really, really hard. I think Jesus never said, make sure in fact, it's so funny. Even, we talk about AfterHours being a faith community, and there's just so much baggage with the word church. And even the idea of gathering together, like it's hard to even come up with another name. On our webpage and stuff and other places we'll say, we get together, we gather. Mm-hmm. The idea of saying we worship feels like there are so many churches across the country and world, and there's no way to say this without it possibly sounding insulting, and I don't mean it to, but that do something really, really well that need not be done. Mm. And Jesus never said, make sure you get together, especially once a week, ideally on this day or this time, but actually it doesn't even matter. Just make sure you get together and tell me how great I am. Just continually tell me I'm awesome. Just treat me like your boyfriend Jesus. Just, man, you're the greatest God. You're the bestest Jesus ever. You're the most best Jesus, and I would do anything for you. Good, because we need some people to go to Haiti. Well, not that. I only have so much vacation time. But anything else I would do for you because you're the best. And I think Jesus goes, I get it. But I think, if any of us had somebody constantly tell us how awesome we were, didn't do anything, we would start to question. And you and I sure as hell ain't Jesus. Yeah. Like, if we're bright enough to figure that out, don't we think that Jesus is smart enough to go, they talk about it all the time, and they even get together in these like $1 million facilities and create this whole thing of different ways to tell me I'm awesome. But they stepped over a homeless guy to get.
Well, I think that's where you get all the pushback in our faith, like history with the Book of James, right?
Yeah, I mean, for AfterHours people, I think in general, they know that what they're doing is they're coming to a place to investigate their faith and to look into what it is that they're struggling with or that they have questions for. But it's not. It's very, very laid back. It's not going to be one of these $1 million facilities. And quite frankly, I think for a lot of them, that's the appeal. The appeal is that it's not. Actually, you and I were talking before we went on the air, and you were talking about the guy that does the podcast that has one that is really quality, and then the other one where he just clicks on the mic and goes.
Yeah,
I think we live in a time that people genuinely appreciate the authenticity over the polish.
Mm-hmm.
Even when it's something like, hey folks, guess what? The recorder turned off, and sorry, but that happened. Because I think people generally go, you know what? Yeah, that happens. Like that happens to me. And it's nice. I think there's a disconnect when we try to make anything too perfect. And my background was as a performer, and I think there's value in presenting a quality product. It gets a little dicey when the product is God, when the product is Jesus. who came at this world with such an authenticity and a genuine desire to connect. It's a struggle when that is laid on top of, all right, make sure as soon as the congregation stops applauding, you're already walking up to the mic because we don't want any dead air between the pastoral prayer and the Our Father. Yeah,
I think you're hitting on two things there, Jerry, and why things are going well out there. I think one, you're a pastor that's actually doing community with the community that you're a part of. You know, I mean, how many? I'm guilty of it myself in days, but like how often have we seen pastors who, man, they're leading incredibly, but they don't know anyone.
Right.
They know their director of operations. They know they know that guy, girl.
Right.
But man, tell me somebody that's in the pews or in the seats or around, And so I think that is a huge thing, regardless of however large or small, or I think that is regardless of the point the church is or the community is that, hey, we're going to do it together, and I'm going to be in it. So here's what's going to happen. If I'm going to be in this with you, you're going to see my stuff too.
Right.
You're gonna see my stuff, and we being Jesus people, like we've centered on Him. For us, He really didn't have stuff, like.
Right.
He's not, Paul says, I come with my weakness. Jesus' weakness isn't that, but what Jesus does do is man, He's around the table all the time.
Right.
And He's breaking bread.
And He had no hierarchy.
Yes.
Of people. Like he was fine being with kings and rulers, and equally fine being with prostitutes and tax collectors and zealots. And that's fresh and really appealing, especially in our society now when we have managed to quantify relationships. Like, okay, is this person worthy of my time right now? I don't know. Jesus was really like, no, like everybody can come to this table. We'll all hang out.
Right.
And I really, there's a great Oscar Wilde quote that said, every saint has a past, every sinner has a future. And I love the fact that it is a phrase that sort of levels the table. And it's like, look, and I think Jesus was big at that. Jesus was really big at going, you're all welcome, and let's share stories. Let's share stories. Let's do that. After hours, I'm sure I guess we could do it without food and drink. But I just think that sharing a meal cuts across virtually every time zone.
That's right.
Every culture, and it creates it's just a great lubricant for helping break people open and get to a place that's deeper.
Part of what makes any community, not just a spiritual community, but any community, what gives it identity is ritual. So is sharing that meal, is that part of your ritual of after hours? Is there a ritual to after hours?
Yeah. I think we've had actually a lot of discussion about this at After Hours, because I said, I know we sort of pride ourselves as being these sort of rogues and rebels, this sort of island of misfit toys, and we just kind of go to our own drummer and blow. I go, and that there's an element of that that's really true, and there's no question. Having said that, there's also a part that goes, okay, let's try to do an after hours and have me start by going, what, this week, we're not going to make sandwiches. I'll just go and get like a foot long before I go down to the park, but we're just going to eliminate that part. Like it would hit the fan.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't know why exactly. They're just like, well, that's what we do. And I'm like, okay, well, we'll make sandwiches, but tonight I'm just not going to talk. We'll just see how you guys are doing. They go, well, what do you mean we're not going to? I didn't really prepare anything, and we're not going to have any conversation at all. We're just going to go straight to joys and concerns and our highs and lows. People would go, well, what the hell? Like, we came here to learn. So I go, okay, you're right. Let's have the conversation. Let's go ahead and make the sandwiches. But
so I want to make sure I'm hearing this. So even in a community like After Hours, like the ghost of church past still shows up and saying, "We've always done it this way." Is that true?
And you know what? And it's unavoidable. If you look over your morning this morning, no one would say, nobody broke out the Gloria Patri. At least I don't think so in your house. But you know what? You got up, and you did a thing.
Yeah.
And then you let the dog out and you did a thing. And then okay, do I turn on the shower and brush my teeth and then put on my contacts? Or do I put on my contacts, brush my teeth, and then turn on the shower? Well, no, for me, I've turned on the shower and let the water heat up. And you know what I'm doing? That's my ritual. That's my morning ritual. And we can't avoid it. Now, I will say in 9 years, AfterHours has had prayer stations, and then we didn't. And then we had written prayer requests, and then we didn't. And then we had a final song that we all sang together, and then we didn't. And then we have music from my iPod. And then we did communion at every location. And then we stopped and only do it at one location. So I think the key is not to apologize for ritual, but to also say, are we serving the ritual, or is the ritual serving us? Like, is this still have meaning for us? That to me is like kind of a big deal. I think too often ritual becomes, well, that's just the way we've always done it. Yeah. And I think for folks, that may be the initial trigger when they go, this feels weird, but to really ask the question, well, why? And sometimes there's not a good reason.
Yeah.
And when I look at the changes that we've made, you know what? It worked at a particular time and place. It doesn't work anymore for us to do it that way.
I think part of that is like what you're saying is there are things that we have always done, right? And there's things that has come and gone. For me, when I hear those things, I think about our church context, our community context. Those things that never leave are a part of the DNA and the vision of the community. And the things that come and go have been things that have brought up and brought to life part of those core things, and then they left. And we brought them up in a different way.
Yes.
And I think
great. That's an excellent way to put it. There's the DNA, and then there's the things that express the DNA.
Yeah.
And I don't think there's much of a problem with having with changing the expressions of the DNA. It's when you mess with the DNA.
Yeah.
You know, I think it would be, you know, like I said, we've had a lot of changes, but if somebody came in, you know, there's going to be a new pastor July 1st. And I think the reality is they're going to change things.
Yeah.
And they should. It will work different for them than for. But I think at the core of the DNA, if they said, yeah, you know what? So screw the homeless. Mm-hmm. We're not going to really do it. That's like at the core of our DNA is to be with those folks who are on the street in that context. That would be messing with the DNA. To sit there and go, hey, are you guys cool if we make the sandwiches at the end? And then I think people would go, you know, I don't know if we've ever done it that way. Let's try that.
Yeah.
I think they're two very different things. I think you hit it right on the head.
Yeah.
You know, it sounds like with AfterHours that the folks who come, like very few of them are looking for church, but they are looking for the things that we encounter in church, that even, dare I say, that church provides, you know, community and support. Do the folks at AfterHours, do they know that they're a part of church?
You know, I think they, I had a conversation with one of the guys who's, one of our places is an Irish pub. And the guy came up to me because he heard about me moving, and I'm going to be in a new location come July 1st. And I told him that the bishop appointed me, and he's got this thick Irish brogue, and he's like, Jesus Christ, Jerry, what do you mean your bishop? You're appointed? He goes, you got a bishop? He goes, I didn't even know you had a bishop. He goes, I just thought he goes, like you're you got a collar, Jerry? You're a priest? And I said, well, you know, I said, I'm clergy, I'm ordained. And so do the people that come know that we're a faith community? Absolutely. Apparently our landlord didn't know. He literally said, he goes, I just thought you guys were doing great things. You know, I didn't realize that it was like a formal thing, which was really a crack up. And Alan is, I'm pretty certain, hardcore Irish Catholic. And so, of course, to him, this looked nothing like church. You know, of course, this wasn't church. He knows what church is. You got to genuflect and cross yourself.
Where's your robe? And
yeah, I mean, there was nothing that looked like that. But I would say the people, I think you phrased it well. I think the people that come are looking for what good churches do, and they are looking for that authentic connection where they can both connect to something bigger than themselves and connect to other people. I think that connection is really the through part. And for AfterHours, the way that we do that in an intentional way is through is through service. And so for us, it's that, those are the three points that we try to hit every time is, how do we connect to something bigger? How do we connect to each other? And how do we connect in a way that provides service to the wider community? And I think as far as guidelines, that served us pretty well. And I also believe After Hours is it's a much younger community than I am. It's probably 25 and probably 27 to 37 is probably the sweet spot for 90% of the folks that come. And I think in that age group, there's a real sense of, I really need to be a part of it. I really need to, in the quadrilateral for us Methodists, there's that piece that's experience. Yeah. And they really need to see that there's experience attached, to the theology and to the scripture and to the ritual. There has to be that experience component. And I know for a lot of folks, they wouldn't care if I was a ordained clergy or not, and they wouldn't care how well I knew the Bible. They want to know, hey, are you rolling up your sleeves? Are you getting your hands dirty? Because that's what we want to do. And I think that's where the value lies for a lot of them, and to be able to have a place to share their life and the highs and lows,
Well, you mentioned that your time at After Hours is kind of drawing into a new phase or a different phase, or even I don't want to say that it's ending, because we know that it doesn't necessarily work that way, but you are going to another church. You've been appointed to another church. So any bold predictions about like what you're going to do up in Aspen?
I don't know if I would say bold predict. I think if I'm true to what I'm saying, if I'm actually living what I profess, it would not be to go into Aspen, which is where I'm going to be appointed. And, the optics couldn't look worse. A pastor serving the poor on the streets moves to minister to millionaires. But if I was going to any other church, is to go in and go, okay, here's what I know works. We feed the homeless, and that's the way we're going to do it. Because to me, I'm a big fan of missional church over sort of an attractional church model. And I think with a missional church, you go into community and you say, where are your needs?
Yeah. What's the need?
This community, not the one I've just done. What are the needs of this community? And, for example, I didn't know this until within the last, week or so. The Aspen area has, I think it's 3, 4, 5 times the number of suicides than the national average.
Wow.
And it's ragingly fascinating to sit there and think, really? This is a place where the median home price is $6 million. There's gorgeousness everywhere you look. The town is as quaint as you could possibly have. What in the world? And so for me, it's worth examining and saying, well, what are the services that are provided? And it's not just Aspen. It's actually the entire Rocky Mountains. The top 10 states with the highest suicide rate are all in the Rocky Mountains, except for Alaska.
Huh.
They even have a horrible nickname, but there's the Rust Belt and the Bible Belt. They call it the Suicide Belt, and they attribute it to the fact that there's lots of open plains, there's lots of isolation. There's honestly, and not to be political, but there's really easy access to guns, and there's very little mental health care because the communities are so spread out. So you've got no help, you've got access to firearms, you have isolation. When you put it all together, you go, no, I see that. I see it. So that may not be the thing, but that's one of the things I've recently seen that may change. I also know that there are people craving community everywhere you go. And I think I'm pretty good at doing non-traditional community. So there may be something brewing up there. We'll see how that all plays out. I've got to go in and sit down and shut up and listen to the community first before I make any grand schemes like that. So.
Oh yeah, no doubt.
Well, I think the takeaway for all of us at the end of the day, and now at the end of the podcast, is how do we enter our space, and what we've learned from you today, and thank you, is how do we enter our space and listen and just figure out what the common felt need is.
Right.
And then respond to it.
Right.
And so, and for us that center our lives on Jesus, we think those are Jesus principles.
Right.
If you don't believe in Jesus, but still like the principles, you still got it,
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think there's a beauty in the idea. What is countercultural about Jesus is, Jesus always ran towards the pain.
that's right.
Ignore my 1950s phone.
That thing is awesome.
For those listening, it's a phone on a wall, and there's a cord
That's a
that can
cord.
reach to the bathroom 3 bedrooms
I
down.
really put a quarter in to make a call from my own house.
It's in-
Every time I use it. So.
Sometimes he picks it up and goes, Wilma, will you connect me? Will you connect me? Get me Barney down at the station.
Exactly. That's
Nobody knows I'm talking about Andy Griffith right now.
Exactly. Yeah, hate yourself. So. But I mean, it's for the love of
It's
God.
the Holy Ghost.
I
Let
love
in.
it.
That's
Our time is up, people. Our time is up.
I need to grab that because Jesus waits for no one. So
All right, Jerry, we're going to tell them where's your preferred place for that people get a hold of you online.
Yeah, no, the best place is they can. I would say AfterHoursDenver.org, but that may only be up until the end of the month. My email is goddoesn'tsuck@gmail. So
Amen.
if anybody just texts or shoots me an email to goddoesn'tsuck@gmail, it'll go right to my iPhone. So.
Cool. Jerry, thank you so much. We'll tell people how to get a hold of the book. It's not written just for church people. I think we need to throw that in there.
It's specifically not written for church people.
Complete with, we got to throw in the caveat that there's like drink recipes in it and all that stuff too. So.
Yeah, there are. Yes. Yep. My years of bartending paying off. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
This was great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Take care, man.
Thanks. See you, brothers. Bye.
Thanks, everybody, for joining us on this edition of the Compass Podcast. I want to thank Andrew Jensen and Dan McConnell for doing our technical stuff, and Lane Denson, who makes sure that this podcast is released to the world at large. You can find the Compass Podcast at rethinkchurch.org/podcast and through the social media platforms. My name is Ryan Dunn. I'm available through Twitter at RyanIsDunn.
That's good. That's incredible. My name is Pierce Drake. You can find me at JPDII on Twitter or on Instagram. Hit me up.
All right, we're done.
I really put a quarter in to make a call from my own house. Every time I use it. So.
Sometimes he picks it up and goes, Wilma, will you connect me? Will you connect me? Get me Barney down at the station.
Exactly. That's
Nobody knows I'm talking about Andy Griffith right now.
Exactly.
Somebody
Yeah,
knows.
hate yourself. So. But I mean, it's for the love of
It's the
God.
Holy Ghost.
I love it.
That's
Our time is up, people. Our time is up.
I need to grab that because Jesus waits for no one. So
All right, Jerry, we're going to tell them where's your preferred place for that people get a hold of you online.
Yeah, no, the best place is they can. I would say AfterHoursDenver.org, but that may only be up until the end of the month. My email is goddoesn'tsuck@gmail. So
Amen.
if anybody just texts or shoots me an email to goddoesn'tsuck@gmail, it'll go right to my iPhone. So.
Cool. Jerry, thank you so much. We'll tell people how to get a hold of the book. It's not written just for church people. I think we need to throw that in there.
It's specifically not written for church people.
Complete with, we got to throw in the caveat that there's like drink recipes in it and all that stuff too. So.
Yes, there are. Yes. Yep. My years of bartending paying off. So.
Well, thank you so much for joining us.
This was great, Ryan. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate you guys. Thank you.
Take care, man.
Thanks for taking this journey back in time with us. If you want to check out more Compass, some good follow-up episodes include a fresh look at Radical Jesus with Damon Garcia. That's from August of 2022. And I think episode 111 about 7 reasons why people are leaving church, that would interest you as well. While you're listening, leave a rating and or review. The Compass Podcast is brought to you by United Methodist Communications. And we'll be back with a brand spanking new episode in 2 weeks. Chat at you then. Peace.